Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and today's contract tip has to do with what a buyer should check during their due diligence period. So let's start off with due diligence period. What is it, what to check, and who should check? I've done several videos on due diligence, so the focus of this due diligence video is kinds of things or what sorts of things a buyer should check out. So first of all, what is a due diligence period? Well, I don't know if y'all can see the pups or not. Like I always say, let's look to the contract to see what a due diligence period is. So in the GAR purchase and sale agreement, this is all in the GAR, Georgia Association of Realtors, Form F201, which is the, find my mouse, there we go. All right, GAR F201, which is the purchase and sale agreement, and in the paragraph A, that's where you fill out the time frame for the due diligence period. But in the corresponding paragraph, which is paragraph B, 8 under due diligence, this is what it says the due diligence is. The purpose of the due diligence period. During the due diligence period, the buyer shall determine whether or not to exercise the buyer's option to proceed or not proceed with the purchase of the property. That's all it is, you guys. It creates a mini option contract within the broader context of the purchase and sale agreement. So because it creates a mini option contract, the seller grants the buyer the option to terminate. If the buyer terminates and sends notice of termination within that time frame, none of the rest of the contract matters. That's why it's a mini option contract within the broader context, and that's why you'll see that term in there about the for in consideration of $10, the receipt and sufficiency of which is hereby acknowledged. You need that for legalese for enforceability of a contract because it's a mini option contract. That $10 never changes hands. That's just legalese because it is a mini option contract. All it is the seller granting the buyer the option to terminate for any or no reason. So back to the GAR contract, what it says. That's the purpose. Then it says, if the buyer has some concerns with the property, the buyer may, during this due diligence period, seek to negotiate an amendment to the agreement to address these concerns. Let's look and see what the RE forms contract says. It says the same thing. Under the RE forms, they call this due diligence period the buyer's right to terminate because that's what it is. So this is spelled out in the actual contract under paragraph 6 that has the 6.1 has the time frame. And then in the standard terms, that's exactly what it says it is. Subject to any expiration that was already written out in the contract. It is the buyer's general right to terminate the contract. The seller's granting to the buyer the right to terminate the contract. They'd have to deliver notice, so forth and so on. And again, this is the time frame within which if there are any concerns with the property, then a buyer can address those concerns. So that's the point of today's video. What are the concerns a buyer should be looking at during their due diligence period or right to terminate period? Well, there's all kinds of things. So a buyer has to decide, am I going to go through with the contract or not? What kinds of things are going to help me as the buyer make this decision? Well, I'm going to look at a variety of things. I'm going to look at the structure of the house, the property in and of itself. I'm going to check out the systems. I'm going to check out the materials. I'm going to check out, the systems are like the HVAC, the plumbing, the electricity, the materials, the wood, the roof. What's it made out of? Are they in good shape? Are they not in good shape? Do they need to be repaired? Do they need to be replaced? Are they showing age-appropriate wear? Am I willing to buy the property with that or not? Look at the yard and the lot. Is the property, well, back to systems, is the property on a septic tank or is it on public water? Is it our public sewer? Is it on a well, or is it on public water? These are things that a buyer needs to check out to determine if they're going to move forward, terminate, or try to negotiate something. The lot and the yard. Is it the size? I think it is. This is the time to have a survey. This is the time to check out, am I buying what I think I'm buying? So that's the structure in and of itself. The foundation, so forth and so on. The crawl space, termites, wood infesting organisms, hard to say. Then what about the location of the school? Is it in the school district I think it's in? What's the proximity to work? How do I have to get to work? Do I have to turn left out of at rush hour when there is not a red light and I have to deal with all the traffic? Is that convenient? What about based on my lifestyle? What's the proximity to things in my lifestyle? Proximity to shopping, to restaurants, to activities, to movie theaters, to events that I'm going to attend. Proximity to any of the kinds of things that I enjoy in my life. And then the buyer needs to check out the area. What's up with the homeowners association? Is there a homeowners association? What are the fees? What are the restrictions? What are the covenants? Is there anything pending on that? Check out the neighborhood itself. What kinds of neighbors do I have? Driving through the neighborhood, meeting the neighbors, going out and talking to the neighbors. What's the zoning of the area? Is this neighborhood, what's it zoned? Is there any pending zoning that's going to change? Are there any pending road or public improvements nearby? What's going on behind me? Google Earth is a great website to check out what's going on behind the cedar cypress trees that I can't see behind. And then personal issues, personal financial issues. Am I going to be able to get my loan? Is my job steady? Do I know if the lender is qualifying me based on my actual salary, or are they looking at bonuses? How do they look at bonuses? Are there any judgments against me? Are there any second mortgages out there that I'm not aware of that I have to get off? Are there any liens I need to pay off? How far have I been into a bankruptcy? Did I take a forbearance during the past couple of years on my loan? Am I going to get the loan or not? Is the property going to need flood insurance? What is going to be the homeowner's insurance on it? Am I going to keep my job? Am I getting a raise in my job? Is this going to be a property that I'm going to enjoy? These are all the kinds of things that a buyer needs to determine in order to make their decision to either stay in the contract or terminate the contract. Now, in a buyer's investigation of all these things, if a buyer does find some concerns with the property, the buyer is always welcome to ask the seller, hey, I found some things. I'm trying to make my decision. I've got some things that I'm trying to that I have found concerning. Are you willing to address these concerns? And you negotiate an amendment with the seller to address those concerns. The seller can say, nope, not doing it. Or sure, you know what, I'll do that and that, and negotiate through that. If there is an outstanding amendment between a buyer and a seller negotiating any concerns with the property, that does not delay the due diligence period. The end of that due diligence period is a drop-dead time frame by which the buyer must either decide if they're going to terminate or if they're going to go through. If there is an amendment to address concerns, that needs to be completely negotiated before the end of that time frame. So during that time frame, there's a lot of incentive for a seller to address concerns. After that time frame, not necessarily a lot of incentive for a seller to address those concerns. Again, if you are on the buyer side, an amendment to address concerns and you're coming up to the end of your due diligence period, take that as a no. The seller is not going to do that. Under the GAR purchase and sale agreement, the GAR amendment to address concerns, this is the only amendment in the GAR, Georgia Association of Realtors contract package, that has a time limit on it. Any items must be negotiated between a buyer and a seller and signed on that amendment prior to the end of the due diligence period. If that amendment is signed after the due diligence period and the buyer stays in the contract, those are not enforceable. So, now this is not true with the RE forms amendment during the buyer's right to terminate, but this is just an issue with the GAR amendment. So, if a buyer chooses to stay in the property and you are negotiating an amendment to address concerns, the buyer does not terminate. You go past due diligence. Buyer and seller need to do a brand new amendment on a general amendment to address those concerns, because anything on an amendment to address concerns in the GAR contract package, if it is signed after the buyer's due diligence period, is not enforceable in the contract. That verbiage is in that contract. So, back to the topic at hand. Who is to check all of this stuff? A buyer is to do their own due diligence. You agents are not to do a buyer's due diligence. Now, you can perform a ministerial act of providing some contact information for some vendors to help a buyer with this. And if you are using the GAR contract package, there is a form, and it is called a vendor list, and it is GAR form F834, and it does say vendor list, and this is a blank page where you can fill in the name and contact information of various vendors, or you don't need to use this specific form. But here's the important key on this form. It does state furnishing of any names of vendors provided by broker or broker's affiliated licensee is done as a ministerial act and only as a courtesy to the undersigned, and does not in any way constitute any warranty or representation as to the quality of the vendors, their services, or subsequent reports. The undersigned acknowledges that they have the option to select any vendor of their choice, and that the broker is not responsible or for any guarantees, representations, or warranties of the selected vendors they choose. For good and valuable consideration, the undersigned hereby releases the broker and broker's affiliated licensees from any liability claim arising out of or in connection with the service of the vendor. The undersigned hereby acknowledges receipt of this vendor list. And then there's a place for the buyers to sign that list. Additionally, if you are a maximum one agent, we have the service recommendations that is available to you in the reference section of Paperless Pipeline, or you can get it from your broker or managing broker, that has a list where a buyer agrees. It says, I choose to hire an independent home inspector of my choice, and they select yes or no, and it has a whole list of things, and they sign it. Additionally, I just want to point out some verbiage in the GAR contract, and it is also in the RE forms contract as well. Again, just reminding you that these efforts, this research, what a buyer is to check out is a buyer responsibility. And this is reminded, the contract itself reminds the buyer. In the GAR contract, under the section B10 under brokerage, it does specifically talk about buyer and seller. It says under paragraph 10C, actually, disclaimer, this is the brokerage paragraph. It does say buyer and seller have not relied upon any advice or representations of brokers other than what is included in this agreement. Brokers shall have no duty to inspect the property or to advise the buyer or seller on any matter relating to the property which could have been revealed through a survey, appraisal, title search, official Georgia wood infestation report, utility bill review, septic system inspection, well water test for radon, asbestos, mold, methamphetamine, lead-based paint, moisture test of stucco or synthetic stucco, inspection of the property by professional construction expert, structural engineer, environmental engineer, review of the agreement and transaction by an attorney, financial planner, mortgage consultant, tax consultant, and consulting appropriate governmental officials to determine, among other things and without limitation, the zoning of the property, propensity of the property to flood, flood zone certifications, whether any condemnation action is pending or has been filed by any other any other government improvements are planned. Buyer and seller acknowledge broker does not perform or have expertise in any of the above tests or inspections. And it goes on and on. Again, this is just to point out that you as the agent can guide the buyer as to these types of things that the buyer needs to check out during their due diligence period, and perform the ministerial act of giving them some contact information, as long as you give them more than one contact for the particular issue that it is they're going to check out. And also, just make sure we're in an extremely competitive market. I definitely want you, I know these buyers want these houses, but I definitely need for you as the agent to have a conversation with the buyer of the number of days due diligence that they are going to agree to in a contract. And if that is a shortened number, please make sure that you have this discussion with the buyer, what that means as far as terminating a contract. If a buyer terminates outside of an agreed upon contingency, not only are they at risk for losing their earnest money, but they are also in default, and the brokers have the right to pursue them for the commission. So it's not just an earnest money issue. There's more to it. At the very least, I highly suggest at least 1 day due diligence so your buyers can sleep on it and make sure this is what they want to do. But based on all of these reasons presented in this video, you definitely need to have a discussion with your buyers about the length of time for their due diligence to make sure to check all these things out to help them decide if they're going to go through with the contract closing or terminate. Thank you guys so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.